We are currently using Teams across our organisation, but are currently considering Yammer to engage with all staff. Would you recommend org-wide Teams and Yammer or just Teams? We want to maximise engagement across a broad remote workforce. So how would you suggest we tackle that?
We kind of touched on this in one of the previous conversations. Microsoft Teams and Yammer do provide very similar functionality. If you're in the process currently of trying to get more people up to speed with using Microsoft Teams, and you then bring in another tool like Yammer, which provides very similar functionality, you may find that adoption of Teams starts to fall and Yammer starts, and you'll end up with a disparate use of the two applications. I would really consider whether Microsoft Teams can provide all the functionality and then try and develop a strategy for where Yammer can fit into that process, if at all.
Yeah, I think one of the things that certainly I've seen in my career is the kind of, as you've introduced IT systems into organisations, for some reason or other, the actual adoption of all of that capability doesn't quite hit the mark, and IT updates all become too difficult and too much to do. So I would totally agree with what Hugh's saying, that actually having an organisation totally all on the same platform or using the same tools within that platform, it by its nature is going to start to help drive an engagement if those are the channels and tools that are being used all the time, particularly if some of those tools are also used to support some of these digital face-to-face, if you like, events that we're kind of obviously needing to consider at this point, given the pandemic. So I think I totally wholeheartedly agree with Hugh, but it's about creating it in a very engaging way. So understanding why is it helpful and how will it help me in my job.
I also think just on the back of that, it helps to come up with a strategy for when you're rolling those out, rather than just deploying an all-company team and then seeing what happens. I really recommend that people come up with this sort of 3-month strategy of, okay, what type of communications are we going to put in there? Are we going to have video? Are we going to chat? Can we brand those up? So that when you start to create that all-company team, it's really got an engaging 3-month plan to drive that adoption and get people thinking, right, this is really useful and I can see why I'd want to use it.
Absolutely, completely agree with that. I think where it falls down is where you've got a communication strategy that's not talking to an IT strategy, that's not talking to an HR strategy for training. And I think where you've got something like this, you really need it to be adopted at the highest level, really, and part of a wider business strategy. And the communications leg obviously is around engagement and communication, and IT in terms of implementation. But they all need to talk to each other.
Great, thanks for that both. And along the same lines, we've got a question here from John, specifically aimed at internal comms within the police force, where they've got a big challenge is engaging frontline officers when out and about. Is there anything specific that you can add to that scenario around what we've just talked about in terms of the strategy and everything else?
I think from my perspective, this is kind of, I touched on this a little bit in the video, that I think we need to kind of start to rethink a little bit in terms of our internal communications and move away from that traditional side to more social media led. So if we think about how we take our information in terms of social media, it's all very short and succinct. And if the tools and techniques through Microsoft Teams can be applied to a tablet or a mobile phone, it can help then encourage people who are in the field to be able to access that information. But it's a combination. It's about the accessibility of that communication through devices, but it's also about making sure that your content is succinct and short and to the point that gets your message across in a way that's engaging.